Julius stood quietly outside the jewelry store, staring once more at the velvet box resting in his palm. Inside it lay a simple yet elegant diamond ring. Not the biggest, not the most expensive, but to him, it was priceless. He smiled to himself. So this is really happening. For years he had imagined this day. He had imagined kneeling before the woman who had slowly healed every lonely corner of his heart. The woman who had entered his life so unexpectedly.
Nia.
He gently closed the ring box and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Tonight, he whispered. Tonight, she'll become my fiancée. Across town, Nia stood before the mirror inside her room. She wasn't trying on expensive makeup. She wasn't practicing a speech. Instead, she kept replaying every word Julius had spoken the previous night. I love you. She smiled without realizing it. Her fingers brushed against the small white patch on her neck, the birthmark she had always tried to hide. Yet Julius had looked at it as though it were the most beautiful thing in the world. No one had ever done that before. Not even Frank. Especially not Frank. She remembered how Frank always wanted to change her. Dress differently. Behave differently. Become someone else. But Julius, he simply loved her exactly the way she was. A tear quietly rolled down her cheek. Not from sadness. From relief. Perhaps real love truly existed. Meanwhile, inside the hospital parking lot, Eric parked his SUV before turning toward Sandra. We're here. Sandra looked through the windshield. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't because she feared illness. She feared the truth. Every vibration from her phone felt like another nail sealing her fate. Toby had already called 7 times.
7.
She hadn't answered once. Eric noticed her staring. You're nervous.
No.
You are. I'm just tired. Eric didn't respond. Instead, he stepped out of the car. Sandra followed slowly. Back inside Toby's apartment. He paced endlessly. Why isn't she answering? He checked his phone again. No reply. No message. Nothing. Donald watched him from across the office lounge. You've called someone almost 10 times. Toby quickly locked his phone. It's nothing. Donald laughed. When a man says it's nothing, it's usually everything. Toby forced a smile. I just need to reach someone. Donald folded his arms. Someone, or someone's wife. Toby froze. Only for a second. But Donald noticed. Interesting. Very interesting. Back at the hospital, Eric completed Sandra's registration. The nurse smiled politely. Doctor will see you shortly. Sandra sighed. I told you nothing is wrong. Eric looked directly into her eyes. I hope you're right, but if you're lying to me. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Sandra looked away. Elsewhere, Charles spotted Nia leaving a bookstore. His face brightened immediately. Nia. She turned. Oh, Charles. He smiled warmly. I haven't seen you since class. I've been busy. I can see. He hesitated. Would you perhaps? Before he could finish, a familiar black SUV pulled up nearby. Julius stepped out. Their eyes met instantly. His smile alone answered every question. Charles looked from Julius to Nia, then back again. He understood. Completely. So, there really was someone. Julius walked over confidently.
Nia.
Hi. Charles politely extended his hand. I'm Charles. Julius. The handshake was firm, respectful. Charles smiled. I think I interrupted something. A little. All 3 laughed. Charles looked at Nia. I wish you happiness. Thank you. He nodded once before quietly walking away. For the first time, there wasn't jealousy inside him. Only acceptance. Some people were simply meant for each other. Inside the car, Julius glanced toward Nia. You okay? She smiled. I am now. He reached across and held her hand. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Silence had never felt so peaceful. Meanwhile, inside the examination room, the doctor reviewed Sandra's vital signs. Blood pressure normal. Temperature normal. He looked up. What symptoms do you have? Sandra hesitated. Just nausea. When did it begin? Yesterday. The doctor nodded thoughtfully. We'll run a few routine tests. Eric quietly listened. Sandra felt her heartbeat quicken. Routine tests. What if?
No.
Impossible. Or was it? Back at Toby's office, Donald couldn't shake what he had witnessed. Toby wasn't behaving like himself. He barely focused during meetings. His phone never left his hand. Every few minutes, he checked it again. Donald finally walked into Toby's office. Brother. Toby looked up. I've known you for years. So stop lying. I'm not. Donald leaned closer. Who is she? Silence. Long, heavy silence. Finally, Toby answered. You wouldn't understand. Donald sighed. Try me. Toby looked toward the window. It wasn't supposed to happen. Donald frowned. What wasn't? I didn't plan any of this. Donald slowly realized. This wasn't casual. This was serious. Dangerously serious. Elsewhere, Julius stopped outside a quiet garden restaurant overlooking a lake. This place. Nia whispered. It's beautiful. I thought you'd like it. I love it. They walked inside together. Soft music filled the air. Fresh flowers decorated every table. Candles flickered gently despite the afternoon breeze. It felt magical. Almost unreal. The waiter led them toward a private corner overlooking the water. Nia smiled. You planned all this? Maybe. You definitely did. He laughed.
Guilty.
Not far away, hidden safely inside his jacket. The ring waited. Only a few more hours. Then, everything would change. At the hospital laboratory, the nurse collected Sandra's blood sample. It won't take long. Sandra nodded silently. Eric watched every expression crossing her face. Every hesitation. Every nervous movement. His military instincts refused to rest. Something wasn't adding up. Something was deeply wrong. He simply didn't know what.
Yet.
As evening slowly approached, clouds gathered once again. The wind became cooler. The same weather that had interrupted Julius and Nia's previous date seemed determined to return. Julius looked toward the sky. Not this time.
Nia laughed.
You sound like you're negotiating with the weather. I am. The rain already stole one perfect night. It won't steal another. She smiled. I'll stay with you, rain or shine. Julius looked at her lovingly, then quietly touched the ring inside his pocket. Not much longer, he thought. Just a little longer. Unaware that elsewhere, lives were beginning to unravel. And, before this day came to an end, more than one heart would face a decision that could never be undone. The lake shimmered beneath the fading afternoon sun. Gentle ripples carried reflections of golden light across the calm water, while soft music drifted through the garden restaurant. For a few precious moments, the world seemed perfectly still. Julius couldn't stop looking at Nia. She sat across from him, wearing a simple cream-colored dress that moved gently whenever the breeze found its way through the open terrace. She wasn't wearing expensive jewelry. No glamorous accessories. Only the tiny silver bracelet her late grandmother had once given her. Yet to Julius, she looked more beautiful than anyone he had ever seen. Nia noticed him smiling. What? You know exactly what. She laughed softly. I really don't. I've spent the last 10 minutes pretending to read this menu. She glanced down. So have I. Both of them laughed. The nervousness between them somehow made everything sweeter. The waiter returned. Are you ready to order? Julius nodded. I'll have the grilled salmon. Nia smiled. And I'll take the herb chicken with vegetables. The waiter bowed politely. I'll bring your drinks immediately. As he disappeared, silence settled once again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Their eyes said everything words could not. Miles away, Sandra sat beside Eric inside the hospital waiting area. The white walls suddenly felt colder than before. Every passing nurse made her heart race. Every opening door stole another breath from her lungs. She clasped her hands tightly together. Please, not today. Not now. Eric quietly watched her. He had served long enough to recognize fear. This wasn't ordinary anxiety. This was someone waiting for something they already believed was true. He leaned closer. Sandra. She looked at him. If there's something you need to tell me, she immediately interrupted. There isn't. He nodded slowly. Then why won't you look me in the eyes? She looked away again. I already am.
No.
His voice remained calm. You're looking everywhere except at me. Sandra swallowed hard. The lie was becoming heavier every second. Across the city, Toby stared at his phone again.
Still nothing.
No missed calls. No messages. No explanation. Donald quietly entered the office carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one on Toby's desk. You haven't touched your lunch. I'm not hungry. You've said that since yesterday. I'm fine. Donald folded his arms.
No.
You're pretending. Toby rubbed his face. I don't have the energy for this. Donald sat down opposite him. Then let me make it simple.
He spoke gently.
Is she in trouble? Toby's breathing slowed. He never answered. But that silence said enough. Donald's expression changed. This isn't just an affair anymore. Toby finally whispered.
No.
It's much worse. Back at the restaurant, their meals arrived. Fresh herbs filled the evening air. Mia smiled after taking her first bite. This is amazing. I knew you'd like it. You've been here before? No. She looked surprised. You chose a place you've never visited? I read every review. She laughed. You researched restaurants? For weeks. Weeks. I wanted tonight to be perfect. Something about the way he said it made her pause.
Perfect.
There was something different about him today. He seemed unusually careful. Almost
Prepared.
She tilted her head. Julius. Are you hiding something? His heart skipped. Me? Yes.
No.
She narrowed her eyes playfully. You're terrible at lying. He laughed. I know. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Whatever it is, you don't have to be nervous. If only she knew. The small velvet box resting inside his jacket suddenly felt heavier than stone. Inside the laboratory, a technician handed several printed reports to the attending physician. The doctor reviewed them carefully. His eyebrows tightened. He read them once, then again. Finally, he reached for Sandra's file. Nurse. Yes, doctor? Please ask Mrs. Sandra and her husband to come into my office. The nurse nodded. Right away. Outside the office, Sandra heard her name. Her stomach dropped. Eric stood. They're ready. She couldn't feel her legs. One step, then another. Every movement felt slower than the last. Inside the doctor's office, the physician invited them to sit. He folded his hands together. I've reviewed your blood work. Sandra's heartbeat thundered inside her ears. Eric waited quietly. The doctor continued carefully. There are no signs of infection. Sandra almost sighed in relief. But the doctor wasn't finished. However, everything stopped. The room itself seemed to freeze. Your hormone levels indicate that you're pregnant. Silence. Absolute silence. Sandra closed her eyes. The words she had feared had finally become reality. Eric stared at the doctor. What did you say? The doctor repeated calmly. Congratulations. Mrs. Sandra is approximately 6 weeks pregnant. Eric slowly turned toward Sandra. She couldn't look at him.
Not now.
Not ever. His voice came out almost as a whisper. You knew. She shook her head. No. You suspected. A tear slipped down her cheek. I wasn't sure. His breathing became uneven. When were you planning to tell me? Sandra covered her face. I'm sorry. The apology shattered whatever peace remained. Eric stood. Without another word, he walked toward the window. His military discipline held his body still. But inside, everything was collapsing. One question echoed louder than every other. Is the baby mine? Meanwhile, Donald received a phone call. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He answered. Hello. A woman's voice spoke quietly. Is Toby there? Donald frowned. Who's calling? Silence.
Then,
I just need to know if he's okay. Donald looked toward Toby's office. May I ask who's speaking? The line disconnected. Donald lowered the phone slowly. His instinct sharpened. Someone was hiding. And somehow, that hidden person was connected to Toby. Back at the restaurant, the sky darkened. Wind rustled through the nearby trees. Tiny waves began dancing across the lake. Nia smiled. I think the rain found us again. Julius looked upward. Not yet. You still think you can negotiate with the weather? I've almost convinced it. She laughed. I admire your confidence. Lightning flashed far in the distance. Still beautiful. Still harmless.
For now.
The waiter approached. Dessert? Julius smiled. Actually, could you give us just a few minutes? Of course, sir. The waiter disappeared. Julius inhaled deeply. His hands suddenly felt cold. This was it. Months of dreaming. Weeks of planning. Years of hoping. Everything had led to this moment. Nia noticed his expression. You're making me nervous. He stood slowly, walked around the table, then stopped beside her. Every sound around them seemed to disappear. Nearby conversations faded. Even the wind felt quieter. Nia looked up.
Confused.
Julius. He smiled. The kind of smile filled equally with joy and fear. He reached inside his jacket. Her eyes widened. The small velvet box appeared in his trembling hand. Time itself seemed to stop. Nia covered her mouth. No. He lowered himself onto one knee. The restaurant fell silent. Several guests turned toward them. No one spoke. Only the soft breeze remained. Julius opened the box. The diamond sparkled beneath the fading evening light. Nia. His voice trembled. I spent a long time believing love wasn't meant for someone like me. She was already crying. But then, you walked into my life. You never tried to change me. You never asked me to become someone else. You simply accepted every broken piece of me. And somehow, you made me believe I could become whole again. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You've shown me kindness when I least deserved it. Patience when I was afraid. Hope when I'd almost forgotten it existed. He smiled through his own tears. I don't promise a perfect life. I don't promise endless sunshine. But I promise that no matter how hard the rain falls, you'll never face another storm alone. He took a shaky breath. Nia, will you marry me? The entire restaurant waited. Every heartbeat, every breath, hung in the silence. Nia looked at him, at the ring, at the man who had loved every scar she had tried to hide. She whispered through tears. Yes. Then louder. Yes. The restaurant erupted into applause. Julius slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She threw her arms around him. Both of them laughed through their tears as the first raindrops finally began falling from the evening sky. The rain had returned, but this time, it wasn't stealing their happiness.
It was blessing it.
Neither of them noticed. Across the city, a different storm had already begun. And before this night was over, the truth buried inside Sandra's heart would spread far beyond the walls of the hospital. Rain danced across the surface of the lake. The applause inside the restaurant slowly faded as guests returned to their own conversations, but Julius and Nia remained wrapped in each other's embrace, as though the rest of the world had disappeared. Julius gently pulled back and looked at her hand. The diamond ring sparkled beneath the restaurant lights. It looks even more beautiful on you, he whispered. Nia laughed through happy tears. I can't believe this is real. It is. She reached up and touched his face. I love you. I love you too. The waiter approached with a warm smile. Congratulations, sir. Congratulations, ma'am. Thank you, Julius replied. The restaurant staff soon arrived with a small complimentary cake decorated with the words, Congratulations on your engagement. Nia covered her mouth in surprise. You planned this too? Julius scratched the back of his neck. Maybe. She laughed. You really planned everything. Almost everything. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I didn't plan for the rain. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the evening sky. Yet neither of them minded. For the first time in years, both of them felt completely at peace. Across town, the silence inside the doctor's office became unbearable. Eric stood with his back to Sandra. His fists remained tightly clenched. The doctor's voice broke the silence. "I'll leave the two of you alone." He quietly stepped outside and closed the door. For several seconds, neither husband nor wife spoke. Finally, Eric turned around. His eyes were calm.
Too calm.
"When?" Sandra couldn't answer. "I asked you a question." Her voice trembled. I don't know exactly." "You know." She lowered her head. "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "The truth." Eric slowly walked toward her. "Look at me." She couldn't. "Look at me, Sandra." Tears rolled down her face as she finally met his eyes. The pain she saw there shattered her heart. "I need one answer." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Is this child mine?" Sandra's lips parted. No words came out. That silence answered more than any confession ever could. Eric closed his eyes. For a moment, he simply stood there. The man who had survived battlefields, who had faced danger without fear, now found himself fighting a wound no weapon had ever inflicted. Without another word, he walked out of the office. Sandra collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Toby stared at Sandra's contact on his phone. His thumb hovered over the call button.
He stopped.
Started again. Stopped once more. Donald quietly entered. "You still haven't heard from her?" Toby looked up in surprise. "What?" "The woman you've been trying to reach." Toby forced a smile. "It's work." Donald wasn't convinced. "I've known you for almost 10 years. And you've never looked at your phone every 30 seconds because of work." Toby remained silent. Donald sighed. "I hope whatever this is, it doesn't destroy your life." Those words lingered long after Donald left the room. "Destroy your life," Toby whispered to himself. "It already has." Back at the restaurant, Julius and Nia stepped outside beneath a large umbrella. The rain had become gentle. Streetlights reflected beautifully on the wet pavement. Nia slipped her hand into his. So, we're engaged." He smiled. "We are." She admired the ring once again. "My mother would have loved you." Julius looked at her. "I wish I could have met her." "So do I." She looked toward the cloudy sky. "I think she's smiling tonight." Julius gently kissed her forehead. "I think so too." Far across the street, neither of them noticed a familiar figure standing beneath a bus shelter. Charles. He had just finished work and happened to glance toward the restaurant. He saw the embrace. He saw the ring. He smiled sadly. "So?" She said yes. There was pain in his heart, but no bitterness, only acceptance. He quietly turned and disappeared into the rainy night. At the hospital entrance, Eric walked alone toward the parking lot. His phone vibrated. It was his older brother. Eric stared at the screen, then declined the call. His mind was somewhere else. He climbed into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. Instead, he rested both hands on the steering wheel. One question echoed endlessly. Who is the father? He had trusted Sandra completely. Never once had he imagined asking himself such a question. Now, it was the only thing he could think about. Rain continued to fall across the city. Not the violent kind. Just a steady rain that washed over streets, rooftops, and windows alike. For some, it felt peaceful. For others, it sounded like the beginning of something they could never escape. Julius drove slowly through the rain-soaked streets. Nia sat beside him, her fingers intertwined with his. Every few moments, she glanced down at the ring on her hand. Then she smiled all over again. Julius noticed. "You've looked at it at least 20 times." She laughed. "Only 20? I stopped counting." She rested her head gently against his shoulder as the car waited at a red light. "I still feel like I'm dreaming." He kissed the top of her head. "If this is a dream, I don't want to wake up either." For a while, neither of them spoke. The windshield wipers moved back and forth in a gentle rhythm. The silence between them was filled with comfort. At the hospital, Sandra remained alone in the consultation room. The engagement ring on her own finger suddenly felt heavier than ever before. She removed it slowly and stared at it. A symbol of promises, of trust, of a marriage that now stood on the edge of collapse. Her phone vibrated. Toby calling. She froze. It stopped. Seconds later, it rang again. She answered this time, her voice barely audible. Toby, relief flooded his voice. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. Sandra closed her eyes. You shouldn't have called. I was worried. It isn't safe. What happened? She hesitated, then whispered the words she had been dreading. Eric took me to the hospital. Silence. What did they say? Another pause.
Then,
I'm pregnant. The line went completely silent. Toby couldn't breathe. Pregnant. His mind raced. When? About 6 weeks. He sat down heavily in his office chair. Does Eric know? Tears streamed down Sandra's face. He knows. And he asked if the baby is his. Toby covered his mouth. His worst fear had become reality. What did you tell him? I couldn't answer. The silence between them felt endless. Finally, Toby spoke. I'm coming to you. No. Her voice was sharp. You can't. I have to. If Eric sees you. She couldn't finish the sentence. Both of them knew exactly what would happen. Donald stood outside Toby's office. He hadn't meant to overhear, but the door had been left slightly open. He hadn't heard every word. Only enough. Hospital. Pregnant. Eric. Baby. Donald's face slowly lost all color. No. He whispered. This can't be happening. The pieces began fitting together. A married woman. Secret phone calls. Constant worry. This wasn't an ordinary relationship. This was a disaster waiting to explode. Meanwhile, Eric finally started his SUV. Instead of driving home, he drove nowhere in particular. Street after street passed before him. Traffic lights changed from red to green. He barely noticed. His thoughts refused to slow down. Sandra had never actually lied. Not directly. She had simply hidden the truth.
but why?
Unless she had been protecting someone. His jaw tightened. Who? On the other side of town, Julius parked outside Mia's apartment building. The rain had almost stopped. Tiny drops still clung to the trees. Mia turned toward him. So, I suppose this is goodnight. He smiled. I suppose. Neither of them moved. Neither wanted the evening to end. Finally, Mia leaned forward and kissed him softly. Thank you. For what? For reminding me that love doesn't have to hurt. Julius gently touched the white birthmark on her neck. I'll spend the rest of my life reminding you. Her eyes filled with tears again. You're going to make me cry every day, aren't you? Probably. She laughed. I'll forgive you. She stepped out of the car. Before entering the building, she turned back. I love you, Julius. I love you too. She disappeared inside. Julius waited until the lights in her apartment came on. Only then did he drive away. Neither of them noticed. A dark sedan parked across the street. Someone inside watched quietly before starting the engine and pulling away into the night. Morning arrived beneath a sky still heavy with clouds. The city looked freshly washed after the night's rain, but not every heart had found peace. Julius woke before sunrise. The first thing he saw was the photograph on his bedside table, a candid picture of him and Nia laughing in a park weeks earlier. He smiled. Then his phone lit up. A message from Nia.
Good morning, fiancé.
Red heart. He couldn't stop smiling. He replied immediately. Good morning, future Mrs. Julius. I hope you're ready for a lifetime of terrible jokes. A few seconds later, another message arrived. Only if you're ready for a lifetime of stealing my fries. He laughed aloud. For the first time in years, the future felt brighter than the past. Across the city, Sandra hadn't slept. She sat on the living room sofa, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The silence in the house was unsettling. Eric hadn't returned home. She understood why. Trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. Her phone buzzed. It was a single text from Eric. We need to talk tonight. No more secrets. Sandra closed her eyes. The moment she had feared was finally here. Meanwhile, Toby arrived at work early, but he couldn't concentrate. Donald watched him from across the office. For hours, neither of them spoke. Finally, Donald stepped inside Toby's office and quietly closed the door. I know something is wrong. Toby remained silent. I don't know the whole story, Donald continued, and I won't force you to tell me. But whatever decision you make today, make one you can live with tomorrow. Those words lingered in the room long after Donald walked away. At a neighborhood cafe, Julius met Nia for breakfast. She walked in wearing the engagement ring proudly. When Julius stood to greet her, she teased him. So, do I look different now? He smiled. Yes. Really? You look even happier. She laughed. I am. They ordered coffee and fresh pastries. Between bites, they talked about ordinary things. Where they might live. Whether they wanted a small wedding or a large celebration. What color flowers Nia liked. For a little while, life felt wonderfully simple. Not far away, Eric sat alone inside his SUV. He held an unopened envelope. Inside was a DNA testing information packet the hospital had given him.
He stared at it for a long time.
Then placed it back in the glove compartment. He wasn't ready. Not yet. First, he needed the truth from Sandra herself. As evening approached, Nia stood on her apartment balcony watching the sunset. Julius had promised to call after work. She gently touched the ring on her finger. A quiet smile crossed her face. Whatever storms might come, she believed they could face them together. She didn't know that, somewhere else in the city, long-hidden secrets were beginning to surface. And once the truth emerged, none of their lives would ever be the same.